The Rebbe, right before Yom Kippur, used to go on to the small shul and he would give a bracha to the bacharim. The Rebbe came out to the bracha to the bacharim already wearing his talis and his kittel. And after Tafshin Memches, after the Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe was benching licht, he had already benched licht. Which meant that after Tafshin Memches, there was no mic. Because if the Rebbe came into the bracha of the bacharim before it was his time of Shabbos, of Yom Tif, so there'd be a mic and we could all hear. But once the Rebbe started to bench licht himself, he came out to the bacharim after licht mentioned bringing a talis and his kittel, and he gave a bracha to the bacharim, which I'll talk about to a different group. Then he went into his room for 1 minute and he came right downstairs for Kol Nidrei. The Seder about Kol Nidrei is that you start off by saying 9 kapitlach, right? You know this, that from Reish Chodesh Elul, you say 3 kapitlach a day until Kuf Yud Daled, which leaves you 36 kapitlach for Yom Kippur. The Baal Shem Tov said to do this. The night of Yom Kippur, before Kol Nidrei, you say 9 kapitlach. After Kishma Shalamita at night, you say 9 more kapitlach. After Musaf, you say 9 more kapitlach. And after Ne'ilah, you say 9 more kapitlach. And you finish the whole Tehillim, from Reish Chodesh Elul till Ne'ilah. It's good to mention, this is good to know, girls, that we say Al Chet by Mincha. We say Al Chet by Mincha. But the minig is when you come to shul after licht pension, before the chazan starts to say Kol Nidrei, you say Al Chet again. Okay, so for boys it's easier because boys don't have to bench licht. When you finish benching licht and you go to shul, before you start Kol Nidrei, you say Al Chet. Now you're a lot of you behind the chazan. Kol Nidrei is not like I don't know what. Like I said, it's a dibus. You can catch up to the Kol Nidrei. If you come to shul, the first thing you do when you come to shul Leil Yom Kippurim is you say Al Chet. Then we say the 9 kapitlach. The 9 kapitlach of Leil Yom Kippur are very, very long because it includes everybody's favorite, Professor Kuf Yud Ches, but it's only counted as 1 kapitel. You have 9, right? Kuf Tes Vav till Kuf Chav Daled, or whatever it is till Kuf Yud Chav Gimel, but it includes Kuf Yud Tes. It takes a long time, and then it's Kol Nidrei. Now it says in Siddur from Halacha that when you do Kol Nidrei, you surround the chazan with the Sefer Torah. And the reason for this is because this is a Torah Standard, right? You're being Mater Neder. So the people holding the Sefer Torah are symbolically the Dayonim. You're releasing vows, just like we do. The men do a Torah Standard of Rosh Hashanah. So everybody does. Men and women do Leil Kol Nidrei. You say Kol Nidrei. All the vows that I made, you are annulling the vows. So there's a tradition that they take out all the Sefer Torah and they surround the chazan with the Sefer Torah. And it says it's a good thing to spend a lot of money and to get the first Sefer Torah for Leil Kol Nidrei. So the Rebbe, of course, always got the first Sefer Torah, but somebody bought the Rebbe's chus every year. His name was Shmerel Gorari. If you were in B'Shivka High School, Mrs. Gorari from 12th grade, it's her father-in-law. No, her grandfather-in-law, her father-in-law's father. He was a chosiv, Net Yisrael, he was a Gorari. And he used to buy the schus of giving the Rebbe the Sefer Torah Leil Kol Nidrei. If I remember correctly, it was always the same thing. $7,000 Sofer. He said $7,000 was an addition. I think the addition was a lot more than $7,000, but that was how the announcement went every year. So he would go over to the Yom Kiddush, take out the Sefer Torah, and hand it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe stood next to the chazan. Then after that, they took out all the other Sfarim. I think that Ashag, the Rebbe's brother, got a Sefer Torah. All the Anashim Shuvim stood. The Rebbe stood right next to the chazan, holding what we call the small Rebbe Sefer Torah, that white one with that beautiful crown. And all the Sfarim were taken out. So his Seder was, this is a spooky piece about history, his Seder was that Simchas Shabbos Bereishis, the Rebbe they would sell mitzvahs, they would sell the schusim. So the Gabe would announce that the schus to give the Rebbe the Sefer Torah, the first Sefer Torah, local was bought by Shmerel Gorari. He bought it every year. Bitnai, as al the 11 Ibrayar, he should live to do it next year, and he's paying, again, if I remember correctly, it was always the same announcement. $7,000 plus more, and the plus more, like I said, was probably not 10 cents. And the Rebbe would sit, and he would nod. Anyway, one year, they made this announcement that next year, Shmerel Gorari buying the schus, and the Rebbe hesitated with a nod, and he finally nodded. The following year, he got out of his seat, he went to the Yom Kippur, and he collapsed right in front of the Rebbe. The Rebbe kept his word to the minute. They had to carry him out. It was one of those stories where if you were similar to Shabbos Bereishis before and the Simchas Torah after, you saw that the Rebbe knows everything. He sort of hesitated the year before. A lot of people used to say to the Rebbe, the Leben Ibn Ayar, and usually the Rebbe said, Amen, right? And once in a while he didn't. And if he didn't, you couldn't force him, you know what I'm saying? There was a Yid whose name was Mendel Kunin. Lived 97 years. He was named after the Tzemach Tzedek. He was born in Shloshim with the Tzemach Tzedek. He came to the Rebbe every Yom Tov, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos, and he would go over to the Rebbe, either by Kesha Bracha or Din Verbring, and then ask the Rebbe for Bracha, they'll let him to the next Yom Tov. So Shavuos, Tavshin Chav Beis, Mistam, or maybe Chav Gimel, 62 or 63, he went over to the Rebbe, and he said, Zanzich Sukkos, and the Rebbe didn't respond. So he got nervous. And he repeated again, Zanzich Sukkos, and the Rebbe didn't respond. He repeated it a third time, so the Rebbe took a look at him. Wir werden sich treffen Rosh Hashanah. We'll meet Rosh Hashanah. He passed away on Rosh Hashanah. That's how serious this business, this Rebbe stuff is. Wir werden sich treffen Rosh Hashanah. Passed away Rosh Hashanah. So this is just a piece of what happened. I wasn't there, punkt. I remember I called up, I was in Manhattan. I was a chazan. So Motzei Shabbos, when you called Crown Heights to find out, this was, the Rebbe waited 45 minutes. Anyway, so the Rebbe used to get the first Sefer, and he stood next to the chazan by Kol Nidrei. My recollection is that on Yom Kippur, the Rebbe used a very old talis. The Rebbe had a different talis. In earlier years, could be Rosh Hashanah. In my years, the Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe used the regular talis. Yom Kippur, the Rebbe had a very old, it was like a very, very dark yellow. You can see that it was cleaned many times. When you dry clean a talis, it gets color, more colored. I don't understand why, but it's basically because it's wool and it's junk. Every time you clean a talis, the Rebbe's talis that he used in Kippur was a very old talis. It was very yellow. It was different than the regular talis that the Rebbe used. And the Rebbe stood next to the chazan. We did Kol Nidrei. And after Kol Nidrei, he would give the Sefer back, went to his place, and we'd have a Ma'ariv. Bechlal Yom Kippur was the most peaceful time of Tishrei. Because the Rebbe wasn't doing anything. The Rebbe just sat in his place. The Rebbe didn't even get an aliyah. Yom Kippur Shacharis, the Rebbe didn't get an aliyah. Maftir, Yom Kippur Shacharis was Chadakov. Chadakov lost his whole family in the Holocaust. And he was Kaveh Yortzeit Yom Kippur. His date for saying Kaddish for all his deceased relatives, father, mother, brother, sister, I don't know how many people, with Yom Kippur. So Shacharis of Yom Kippur, Rabbi Chadakov got the Maftir. So till Napoleon's march, the Rebbe was just standing in his place. So Yom Kippur was very peaceful, very quiet. The Rebbe came in, let's say 10 after 7, Ma'ariv was over by 8:30, it doesn't take that long. And of course you say twice Al-Chet, once in Shmoneh Esrei, and then after Shmoneh Esrei the Chazan sings a bunch of piyutim, and finishes with Al-Chet. Then if it's not Shabbos, we say Avinu Malkeinu, and Aleinu, and everyone goes home. But the Rebbe didn't leave the shul. I was a child. After Ma'ariv, I went home. When I got a little older, I started to realize this is very weird. Half the shul leaves, the Rebbe stays in shul. Why did the Rebbe stay in shul? Because Leil Yom Kippurim, the Rebbe said Tehillim of the Minyan. After Ma'ariv, Yom Kippur night, the Rebbe said the whole Tehillim of the Minyan. So there was a Yid who was actually a relative of the Rebbe's, who the Rebbe apparently liked. His name was Shmerling. He was an elderly man with a little beard, a trim beard. And he was the chazan of Tehillim Leil Yom Kippurim, and he was also the chazan for Tehillim Hashanah Rabbi. He came from Etzisrael to the Rebbe, as far as I remember, every year, until he passed away, I'm assuming. And he would say the Tehillim. And there's a whole bunch of Hiratzins that you have to read, 2 or 3, Tehillim. It's Leil Yom Kippur is one thing, Hashanah Rabbi, he said a whole bunch of Hiratzins. I don't think the Rebbe said them all. So the Rebbe stayed in shul, if it's probably till 10:30, something like that, 10:30, 10:15. And it was one of the few occasions where you would see people leaving, a lot of people leaving, the Rebbe would stay in shul. The Rebbe stayed in shul till after Tehillim, and then the Rebbe went upstairs. Now there is a story, and I'm assuming that it was the first Yom Kippur. I'm assuming that it was Yud Beis, but I don't know it for sure. Uba'akdama, it's a known fact. And you know what the meaning of a known fact is? I heard it from somebody and I choose to believe it. It's very, very hard to know. Tehillim in 770, Shabbos Mevarchim took an hour and a half. If it was quicker than an hour and a half, whoever the chazan was would get screamed at by label groaner in such a way that he would never forget it. He would never ever do it again. An hour and a half to say Tehillim, I don't know about you, is very fast. I mean, my jaws get tired after a while. The rumor is that when the Rebbe went back to his room after Tehillim, he wasn't finished. He spent another half an hour. Shabbos Mevarchim in the morning, the Rebbe did not finish Tehillim. In other words, the Rebbe came out to Shacharis a half an hour later, he was finishing Tehillim. I think it's Shmuel. There's also rumors that when the Rebbe wanted, he could knock off Tehillim in an hour. The Rebbe had different, if you wanted, there was supersonic, and then there was normal, and then there was slow. Normally, when the Rebbe said Tehillim, this is the Shmuel, it took him more than an hour and a half. So the first Yom Kippur, after the Rebbe became Rebbe, the Chazan finished. and the Rebbe was holding Kapitel Tzaddik. It was very far from the end. So the Rebbe turned around and asked somebody else to go to the Yomid. So the Rebbe went to say to Tehillim. The minyan finished. The Rebbe was the only one left behind, or whatever the particulars were. And the Rebbe asked, I don't know how many times, and nobody went. So the Rebbe went himself to the Yomid. I heard this from two people who were witnesses. And the Rebbe started to say Tehillim out loud. And he started to cry, something terrible. He cried his way 60 kapitlach, from Tzaddik till Kuf Nun. As soon as the Rebbe started saying the Tehillim out loud, he became very beis. It took a long time. It was quite an experience. The Rebbe cried his way to the end of the Tehillim, and they made a strong hachlata that the Rebbe will never ever be again a chaz of a Tehillim. They pushed the rachmanis of the Rebbe. He became, because when you say it quietly, you say it quietly. You say it out loud, you create a certain emotion. And the Rebbe was incredibly emotional. I don't know how long it took, but it took much longer than it takes to say 60 kapitlach. The Rebbe pushed cried his way till the end of the Tehillim. It's a story that happened. The Rebbe came into shul for Shacharis 10 o'clock. And like I told you, Yom Kippur was very quiet. He went to his place. The Rebbe didn't even get an aliyah. Chadakov got Maftir. The only thing that happened Yom Kippur morning was that the Rebbe did koyrim. We do koyrim 4 times. We bow 4 times. Once by Aleinu and 3 times by HaKoyanim. And I just finished telling the other group of girls that when the Rebbe did koyrim, the older Chassidim used to say, don't look, it's not respectful. And the younger Bachrim wanted to look. So it was a screaming match. The elder was saying, what are you looking at the Rebbe falling to the ground? But the Rebbe did koyrim ahead of the Chazan, always. The Rebbe did koyrim ahead of the Chazan, meaning to say, when the Chazan said Aleinu, the Rebbe didn't wait until V'anachnu koyrim. The Rebbe did koyrim right away. And then he got up and he watched the Chazan sing, and he would look at the Chazan. When the Chazan would fall to the ground, the Rebbe would turn and look at the Chazan as the Chazan would fall. And the same is true with HaKoyanim. There's 3 times HaKoyanim. The Rebbe would bow ahead of the Chazan. If HaKoyanim is a beautiful melody, it's a beautiful, beautiful tune that the Chazan sings. It takes some time. And the Rebbe would turn and watch the Chazan sing and watch the Chazan do Koyrim. When the Chazan got up, the Rebbe would turn and face the wall again. That was really the only event that happened in Musaf. Musaf of Yom Kippur doesn't have Kaveh and Aleinu, right? You say Chadas Tashatz, Kaddish Teskabel, and right away Tehillim. Because Kaveh and Aleinu you're going to say after Ne'ilah. And the Rebbe would leave. Now, what time did Musaf finish? But then the Chazan, right? It was a quicker Chazan, so it finished 3:15. It was a slower Chazan, it finished 3:45. And when I was a child growing up, it was 7:70 was I hate to say it was a normal shul. So the davening Yom Kippur finished at a normal hour, 3:30, 3:45. But in the later years they would really knock it off. I mean, Musaf could finish 2:30 Yom Kippur, which is very, very fast. But it didn't always finish that early. The Rebbe always wanted a long break. And I remember more than once where they would announce Mincha starting 4:30. You see, because the rule was that the Rebbe did not make us fast an extra minute. The Rebbe did not make us fast an extra minute of Yom Kippur, not an extra minute. So this year, for example, is a very late Yom Kippur, because last year was a leap year, right? In other words, we're already deep into September. By the time Yom Kippur comes, it may already be October. It's a very late Yom Kippur. The later it is, the earlier Yom Kippur finishes, right? So the quotable quote is, when can you blow shofar, end quote, which is not exactly a true question, but you can. It's very close to 7 o'clock. It's not 7:30 or 7:45. It's much earlier. And if Yom Kippur ends earlier, the Rebbe ended quicker. And the Chazon and Pocha did not have time to daven. And there was no monkey business by the Rebbe. Yom Kippur finished on time. The Rebbe never made us wait 1 minute extra. Mamish. So I remember they would announce Mincha earlier, 4:30, 4:45, and Label Gorner would pounce, and all of a sudden, 5:15. The Rebbe wanted a long break. It didn't matter that there would be less time for Mincha and Ne'ilah. Now, there's all kinds of rumors. By the way, just as a childhood memory, when I was a kid, on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the Rebbe's apartment was open. I'm talking before my bar mitzvah. But you know what means the apartment was open? Every room in the house. I and my brother and I, walked up to the Rebbe's apartment and just wandered around. No one gave us a tour. There were people all over the place. We went into the Rebbe's bedroom. The doors were not locked. We went into Rebbe's office. The shaf was full of Sfarim. There was no locks. The Sfarim was sitting on the table. When I was a child, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, one of the things that the kids would do, you went upstairs And the Rebbe's Dira, the Friedrich was open. I walked into the Rebbe's Yechidus, and I didn't even have Seichel. And of course, later on, especially after Pashas Asfarim, everything was locked with 1,000 locks. You couldn't go any place. But as a child, B'chlal, it's good to know. You should know that for most of the years of the Rebbe's Nasiya, 770 was not locked. It was open. The only room in 770 that had a lock permanently closed was the Rebbe's own room. The secretary's office didn't have a lock. The door outside the Rebbe's room, the Nidrei, was not locked. We used to play there. And in Rosh Hashanah Kippur, we'd go upstairs and we would walk around the Friedrich Rebbe's Dira. We didn't have enough Seichel. You could walk to the Friedrich Rebbe's room. And there's nobody was standing there, don't touch. We just walked around. We understood ourselves not to touch, I guess, because we didn't touch. And the Rebbe came into Mincha, 5 o'clock, 5:15. When the Rebbe came to Mincha, he was holding his hat in his hand, because Yom Kippur, you wear a talis by night. The Rebbe holds that wearing a talis at night is a sakona. It says in Kabbalah, I'm wearing a talis is a sakona. Mincha to put on a talis is okay, might have, you shouldn't put it to sakona. Yom Kippur by night, you wear a talis. By night. Because that night is like day. Matzah Yom Kippur, by Ne'ilah you wear the talis, but by Ma'ariv, the Rebbe took his talis off his head and he put it on his hat. So the Rebbe came into the shul to Mincha holding his talis. Mincha of Yom Kippur doesn't start with Ashrei, because Ashrei you're going to say Ne'ilah. Mincha of Yom Kippur starts with Vayibin Seya, right away, Vayibin Seya. And of course the Rebbe always got Shlishi and Maftir Yona, which is a very long Maftir. And I heard the Rebbe say Maftir Yona more than once. It was quiet. I had a pretty good spot. I heard the Rebbe say Maftir Yona. And the famous the Psukim, the Rebbe would say, I'm running away from God. I'm running away from God. Someone made a song now, Ivri Anoichi. That's from Maftir Yona. Someone made a song out of it. And I could hear the Rebbe singing. You can hear the Rebbe, in your memory, you can hear the Rebbe singing those words. But the expression that I'm running away from God. He's running away from the Eibishter. Anyway, the Rebbe said the Maftir Yona. The feature of Maftir Yona, which I want to share, was like this. The Rebbe is wearing a kapota, and on top of the kapota he's wearing a kittel, and on top of the kittel is a talis, and on top of the kittel is also a gadol. If you paid close attention. And again, in earlier years things were different. I read in the Shivas the Rebbe had a kerchief around his neck. I don't remember that. But when the Rebbe said Maftir Yona, right before the Maftir, they would look down, and you could see that from the kittel was sticking out a drop, the red kerchief, the same kerchief that the Rebbe used by Tkiyas, that red kerchief, there was the black one with the feathers, with the flowers, the Rebbe had it in his pocket. And right before we started to say the brachas of the Haftarah, not of the Maftir, the Haftarah, they would look down and just pull it out a tad, a drop. And if you were Mesim Lev, you would see the Rebbe do this every year. The Rebbe would look down. When the Rebbe said the Maftir Yona, he carried with him that same red kerchief that he had used by Tkiyas Rosh Hashanah. The Rebbe went back to his place, another Mincha. Mincha is very long. Mincha of Kippur is very long. It's probably almost as long as Musaf. Shmoneh is not that long. The long Shmoneh is a Rosh Hashanah. Kippur Shmoneh is not long. But the Zogarts, pages and pages and pages and pages before Al-Khat, you read, and all of it takes time. And now 770 is getting noisy, because people are coming to the front. They want to get their place for Napoleon's march. So a whole Yom Kippur was very peaceful, and during Mincha and then leading up into Ne'ilah, everybody's trying to get their spot. So 770 gets a little bit noisier. It doesn't get very noisy, but you can hear noise. And people, my place, I'm not letting you in. I'm letting you in. I'm going to fight with you. I'm going to push. I'm going to get in. But this is how it all happened. You want to say something about the pushing?
Actually, yeah, I have a question, actually.
Go right ahead.
So, not to put it down or anything, but the principle is encouraging everyone to stay for Tishrei,
okay,
to stay in 770 and buy a seat and all the stuff. It's not so practical. Because even if I do pay a few $100s for a seat, I'm not going to be able to concentrate. I'm not going to be able to even maybe get the seat. So what is all this encouragement about staying? What? If
you're going to buy a seat, you'll be able to get your seat.
No.
The answer to your question, young lady, is this.
I would want to stay, but it might not make any sense.
It's very hard. You can't do it and hate it. That's the truth of the matter. You cannot stay in 770 and hate being in 770. The only way to stay in 770 is to say, I'm here because the Rebbe is here, and I'm going to go with the flow. When people push and you stop them, you get smashed. If people push and you just go, it's fine. If you're able to do that, it's the Rebbe's Al Ramas. The Rebbe is in 770. There's no doubt. and it's a very holy place. And to be Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the Rebbe in Shul is a big schus. But I understand you. I understand you very well. Most people understand you're standing in Shul in front of the Rebbe, behave. Okay, so I push you, you push me. You see, there's pushing and fighting. They're very different. And there's two kinds of pushing. One kind of pushing is I want a better spot. One of pushing is I want to push you. And fights are terrible. I told the girls in the other room, did I tell it to you? The Rebbe once came in Yom Kippur morning 11:45, 45 minutes late. Because the Rebbe heard that a woman hit another woman and put her in the hospital. And the Rebbe said he's not coming out to Shacharis, so she walks to the hospital, apologizes, and comes back and she reports back that she apologized. The Rebbe didn't come downstairs, so she came back and she told the Rebbe through the secretaries that she said, I'm sorry. The Rebbe wasn't happy about the fighting. The pushing, it's a part of Chassidus. It is. To be in the Rebbe's Daled Amos is a very special thing. I'm not going to tell you
So
what
is that more important
than Kavana? No, it's not more important than
No, is that more important than like focusing on davening?
That's what I said, Kavana.
Yeah.
I don't think it is. Personally, whoever your mashpia is, you should ask them that question. I don't want to get your wires crossed. You don't need information from 5 people because then you're not going to know what to do. If you daven in 770, you have to be able to accept that it's going to be physically uncomfortable and just be loose. You don't have to hear, you don't have to see, you have to just be there. And then it could work. It really could work. But if you can't do that, if the pushing and the lack of fairness bothers you, then you're going to have a miserable time. It's a personality thing also. But it's a very, very big schos. It's a very, very big schos to be in 770. If you can do it. If you can do it. Okay, I'm sorry, but this is not the time for this Fabrengen.
No, I didn't.
Okay, it's okay, it's cool. No, it's good that you asked. So it starts getting a little bit noisier and pushy. So Mincha takes forever. Mincha finishes what time? 6:30, 6:45. So the guy who davens Mincha always davens very fast, but you have so many pages to read that it just took. Mincha takes an hour and a half. If you start 5 o'clock and finishes 6:30, and there's no way to cut that short because that's not singing. That's just reading page after page after page. Ne'ilah happens to be the shortest tefillah of Yom Kippur. You don't even say Al-Chat Ne'ilah, you just say Hashamdu. The Chazan for Ne'ilah wants to sing, but he's bound by the clock. Whenever the clock says Shofar, Shofar. If he has 45 minutes, it's 45 minutes. He has an hour, it's an hour. If it's a half an hour, it's half an hour. And the Chazan's got to get to the right page, to the page with the Shema Yisrael and the Baruch Shem when the clock strikes this number. And he knew, the Chazan knew. The Rebbe always had by him a clock, a watch. By Fabrengen, the Rebbe had a watch. By David, the Rebbe had a watch. By Fabrengen, you would see the Rebbe pick up the watch and look at it. The Rebbe was the Rebbe B'chlal managed the shul. It didn't look that way, but the Rebbe was managing the shul. Yom Kippur, the Rebbe also managed the shul by looking at the watch. He could speed up the davening, he could slow the davening down, and the Rebbe, as far as I know, always made us get to Yom Kippur and Napoleon's march as early as you could. Precisely, the Rebbe didn't want to make us to fast an extra minute. I remember one year, I don't know what it was, but I remember the year was very exciting. The Chazan went too fast. And it was early. So we got to Kenu Amecha of Ne'ilah. So hey, yeah, na, 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 right? And then I was doing this again and again and again. Yeah, na, na, na. Now, technically, the Rebbe was trying to get us to the end of the fast. So he sang it again and again and again. But it was very exciting. The Chazan Poshet went too quickly. So the Rebbe was singing with us again. Nachamal, 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 Nachamal. It took a long time. And then Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, you say in Yom Kippur 5 times. But when Yom Kippur is Shabbos, you only say Avinu Malkeinu by Ne'ilah. And of course, our custom is we only say Chasoyim and Chosmeinu by Ne'ilah. The whole world says Chosmeinu the whole Yom Kippur. We say Kosveinu and Uchasev L'chaim Tevin, but by Ne'ilah we say Chosmeinu, right? You know that, right? Yes. So in the Avinu Malkeinu also you say Chosmeinu. Instead of Kosveinu, we say L'chaim Tevin, Chosmeinu. So that same year when the Chazan was ahead of the schedule, Avinu Malkeinu, the Nachamal, but the Rebbe got us to Shema Yisrael, Baruch Shem, Hashem Elokim on time, always. Always. There was a rule by the Rebbe, always. There's a story with the Frierdiker Rebbe that in Tafshin Yud, the year that he passed away, the Frierdiker Rebbe came into Mincha very late, and very late probably doesn't mean 5:15, probably means 6:15, impossibly late. And the Frierdiker Rebbe also, all the Rabbeim, there's a Lashon in Hayem Yom. Yom Kippur kommt euch zu fasten 26 Stunden. Yom Kippur, it works out that you fast 26 hours. The Baal Shem Tov, you have stories about keeping Yom Kippur till midnight. He give a tzaddik like the Baal Shem Tov 5 more minutes. Yom Kippur, he can battle 5 more gzeres. The Chabad Rabbeim, as a rule, it was an Inyan Pnimi, I'm sure also, there was not a minute more Yom Kippur. They used the 26 Yom Kippurs fully. Yom Kippur ended on time. But that year, Tafshin Yud, the Rebbe came in so late, it was not possible. It was physically not possible. So Yom Kippur went late. People were talking, why the Rebbe came late. It was a whole big deal. The Rebbe passed away that year, so I guess people understood that something special was going on. But the Seder of Rebbe was that after the fast, there was a Tish, there was a Su'udah, and the people were invited to the Tish, and the Rebbe would speak. So that year, Matzim Kippur, Tafshin Yud, when the Rebbe came in very late to Mincha, and the fast was literally delayed, which was not characteristic of the Rabbeim, the Frierdiker Rebbe spoke on the Maimon Chazal. When you hear a Torah from another person, you should imagine that the person is standing in front to see them. So the Seder was that the Frierdiker Rebbe said this in the Fabrengen upstairs, but they didn't let people in because of the Rebbe's health. After the Sukkos was over, our Rebbe, who was called the Ramash, came downstairs, and the Bachrim were waiting, and the Younger Light waiting, and they would chazer, they would review the Sichos, what the Frierdiker Rebbe said about the table, which wasn't very much. The Frierdiker Rebbe spoke very short. And they repeated this vart. The Rebbe didn't chazer. The Rebbe used to stand, and Mentlik used to chazer. Shmuel Zalman, of other people did chazer about Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe would stand, and he would make corrections. And they chazer this vart that the Frierdiker Rebbe said in the Suda, Matzim Kippur, Matzashin Yudah, Eimesh, Shmuel, B'Shem, Eimrei. The Frierdiker Rebbe used to say this often. The Rebbe didn't say it, as far as I remember. Hey, Ilu Bala Shmuel, Eimed Lenegdei. So the Rebbe said, our Rebbe said, the Ramash, as he was called then, said, this perhaps was the Rebbe the Shver explaining why he came late to Mincha. That he had visitors. The Rebbe, our Rebbe, explained that the reason the Frierdiker Rebbe spoke this Maimon Chazal, Matzim Kippur, because the Frierdiker Rebbe was telling everybody, I had guests that I could see, and I couldn't tell them, excuse me, the minion is waiting. I had to hang out with them as long as they hung out with me. The Rabbeim from the earlier generations, you understand? And the Rebbe explained this. But Azoi, Yom Kippur ended on time. One more personal recollection. I thought this was Lamed Zayin. I think they said it was Lamed Vav. I think it was 75 to 76, but I'm not sure. Bottom line is this. There's a lot of details to the story, but this is my recollection. The Rebbe was davening Ne'ilah, and suddenly the Rebbe indicates that he wants the children standing next to him. All the kids. What I remember was that there really were not that many kids. Not that many kids. And we fit on the Rebbe's bimah, no problem. So we got the push. We loved the Bachim got the push. We couldn't push because we weren't big enough, but we thought it was so cool to push. When you grow up, you find out the pushing isn't that much fun. But when you're a little kid, everything is fun. So we were next to the Rebbe. I was as close to the Rebbe as I am to you. Maybe closer. Maybe the back of that chair. I was very close to the Rebbe. I was 2 or 3 people away. The Rebbe didn't acknowledge us, didn't turn around and say hello and, a baychik, the Rebbe did his thing. But all the children were standing around the Rebbe. And at the end of Chazar Sashatz, the Rebbe sat down. That's how I remember it. I could be wrong, he sat down. And he started to cry like you never heard. I was so close. A long time, he started to cry loud. It was loud for a long time. I was such an immature boy, I couldn't appreciate how earnest it was. To me it was uncomfortable. A man crying, but on that crying, my brother and I, will never forget it as long as there's a breath in our body. That Matzim Kippur cry, again, I think it was Lamed Vov, but I'm not sure. It was Lamed Vov or Lamed Zayin. The Rebbe sitting down and crying. What happened was the Chazan finished Avinu Malkeinu. If I remember correctly, they sat down. I don't know why they would have sat down because they were standing. Maybe I'm imagining it, but that's how I remember it. And I remember the Rebbe's crying. We finished Avinu Malkeinu, and Talashevsky was the Chazan then. Moshe Talashevsky doesn't know what to do, so he waits and he waits and he waits, and then he turns to Label, Groner, and says, "What should I do?" And it was like this. Rabbi Chadakov was standing there. They motioned Rabbi Chadakov. Chadakov was like this. If I remember correctly, we waited for a while. And at some point, the Chazan kept on going, even though the Rebbe was still crying. And as they say, the Rebbe caught up to the minyan. But it's a moment in my childhood. I was a little kid. I'm still a little kid. And I don't mean that in a favorable way. I mean it in an immature way. I was certainly an immature boy. But the memory I have, the Rebbe sitting down. I remember the Rebbe sitting down. Maybe he wasn't, but that's how I remember it. He cried out loud for a Meshach man. Then you say Shema Yisrael once, Baruch Hashem 3 times, Hashem Elokim. Half Kaddish and Napoleon's March. Napoleon's March is before the Tkiyah. The Tkiyah is after. And then we start singing Napoleon's March. Now let me give you a little bit of background. The Rebbe did not like the fact that he was on a platform. Do you know that? The Rebbe hated the platform. I can't say hated. He didn't like the platform. The Rebbe agreed to the platform reluctantly. And the reason is because halachically, if you are on a separate platform that's more than a certain size and more a certain height and a certain width, you're not a part of the kohol. The Rebbe wanted to be in the same level with everybody. So the first time the Rebbe allowed a platform was Tafshin Lamed Daled, which was the Shnas Hakel, 1973 to 74, the year of the Yom Kippur War. And the way I understand the story is they put it up Erev Rosh Hashanah. The day after Simchas Torah had to be down. There were no chochmas. The Rebbe a whole year davened on the floor. Just for Tishrei, they put the platform up. After Memches, after the Rebbe and Chayamushka passed away, the platform became permanent. The Rebbe was always on the platform a whole year, so everybody could see the Rebbe. When the Rebbe was on the floor, only select people could see him. But remember, till Lamadal, the Rebbe was on the same level. There was no such thing as there being on the platform. So how could you see the Rebbe during davening? You couldn't, unless you were in the front row. So Napoleon's March, the Rebbe got up on his chair, and he jumped up and down. And it was a tzir. The Rebbe's chair is not made for his trampoline, you know what I'm saying? The Rebbe would jump up and down on his chair, jump up and down on his chair. Rumor has it that one year the chair broke, and as long as the Rebbe was jumping on it, the chair stood, and when the Rebbe got off, the chair fell. But the Rebbe would jump up and down on the chair. Now I want you to understand something. The Rebbe got up on his chair until probably after my bar mitzvah. And I don't have any memory of it. My father always told me the Rebbe's getting up on his chair. But I don't remember it. In other words, I know what happened. I'm sure my brother remembers it too. My brother's a year younger than I am. But for some reason, I do not have in my image the Rebbe standing on his chair. But for most of the years, the Rebbe, about 30 years, the end of Musaf, when we started singing Napoleon's March, the Rebbe got up on a chair. Then at some point, I don't know what year, Mem Beis, Mem Gimel, Dal, the Bocharim made for the Rebbe a platform. It like 4 or 5 steps, and they were rather steep, and they would put it against the wall, underneath the Kingston Weibishol. This platform was so high that when the Rebbe was on the step of that platform, the women, forgive me for saying it, could literally reach out and touch the Rebbe's head. The Rebbe was as high as the Kingston Weibishol, which is very high. The Kingston Weibishol is higher than the Eastern Park Weibishol. The windows are higher. So they made this taller. It was easier for the Rebbe. Jumping on the chair is to keep his balance, and this platform was a little easier. But until then, the Rebbe would push it, jump up and down on his chair. Then they made this little platform. The Rebbe used to climb up, and he would stand, and pretty much everybody could see because the Rebbe was very high. Now, the way this would all happen was as follows. We would start singing Napoleon's March, and the Rebbe is facing the wall. And we're singing. At some point, the Rebbe would very gingerly, first very slowly bang on the table, on the stender with one hand, then with both hands. And then the bang would become vigorous, like stronger. And then at some point, the Rebbe would turn around, and his talus is completely covering his face. You couldn't see the Rebbe's face. And he would go to where his chair was, or then later on, he would go to where his platform is, climb up, and clap. Sometimes the Rebbe would clap, sometimes the Rebbe would do this, sometimes the Rebbe would clap, do this, and the Rebbe's face is covered with a talus. And we're singing. As the singing went on, and Napoleon's March lasted between 5 and 10 minutes. It didn't go on for 25 minutes. It was controlled. It was very powerful, but it was a cheshbon. This talus would slowly slide up, until you could see the whole face of the Rebbe. It looked like it was happening by a mistake, but it wasn't a mistake at all. It was clear that the Rebbe would do this slowly, saw his face. And the Rebbe was clapping, and every once in a while the talus was flying. The Rebbe was fixing the talus, just like we fixed it by Tkiyas, and clapping. Either he's clapping like this, or he's swinging his hands, and the Rebbe's face, when you saw the Rebbe's face, the Rebbe looked the same way he looked by Tkiyas. I don't know if I told you. Again, I understand people. I'm not telling you what happened. I'm telling you what I experienced. That's all this is. This is my version. And I look in the Yomanim, and people say the Rebbe's tomato red. The Rebbe was not tomato red. The Rebbe was pale. I've seen the Rebbe tomato red, and by Tkiyas and by Napoleon's March, that I remember the Rebbe was not red. He was pale with a little color, but he felt so far away. The feeling of Napoleon's March of the Rebbe is a million miles away, very far away. And the Rebbe would clap, and as soon as the Rebbe got off the stage or the chair, the Chazan, we would say right, the Tchiyah Gedayla, the Blo Shofar, and then we would say the Shana Boah. Levi Tenenbaum told me that his father, Mendel Tenenbaum, was old. And he said to his son, I'm not going to have koyach to blow shofar, stand next to me, and by the end of Rosh Yom Kippur, when the Rebbe finishes the Napoleon's march, you'll blow the shofar. So Levi Tenem said to his father, I can't blow a shofar in front of the Rebbe. So his father says to him, I can't blow. What happened was the Rebbe finished Napoleon's march, but didn't go down. He stood there, and he looked at Rabbi Tenenbaum, and Levi said, you're blowing. I'm not blowing in front of the Rebbe. So Rabbi Tenenbaum blew the shofar, and then the Rebbe went down, and then you would say, L'shana Ba B'Yerushalayim, and then finish Kaddish. I just want to share something with you. We're little children, what I mean when I say little children, in so many ways we're immature. We're pashat immature. We can't possibly understand, and this is the right word, the earnestness of the Rebbe's position, how serious a job it is, and how serious his demands of us are, how terribly important it is. And being around the Rebbe was an incredible schus, but being around the Rebbe was, I hate to say it, was a pity. It would have been nice if the Rebbe was surrounded by deeper people who were das, who were sensitive to how earnest it was. I can speak for myself. We were children. I was a child when I was 9. I was a child when I was 25. The Ehrenskeit, the earnestness of the Rebbe's role, and the Rebbe did whatever he wanted. You couldn't control the Rebbe. You didn't make the Rebbe do. There was patterns. Everything happened again and again and again. But every once in a while, the Rebbe broke the pattern. And those occasions were the right word is they were scary, they were frightening. When the Rebbe broke the pattern, you guys, oh no, why? What does it mean? You never knew, but you always knew that it meant something. You understand? So one year, for Napoleon's march, it could have been Memches, but I don't remember for sure. But I'll never forget to see it. The Rebbe's up on that stage, the little platform. His towels is covering his face. He's clapping and he's swinging his hand to his whole kayach. The scream is screaming. If you look closely at the Rebbe's body is shaking like one of those, when a washing machine spins and the Rebbe's body was trembling, which meant that under that talus, the Rebbe was sobbing, crying uncontrollably. And I'm watching this. The Rebbe's, his goof is saying, sing. But you could see at the goof treisel, you see that the Rebbe's whole body is shaking, and you understood that the Rebbe was crying. The Rebbe didn't cry because he had a toothache, you understand. He had very important things to be busy with. And when the Rebbe cried, there was deep, serious, pnimius dika and chitzonius dika reasons. So you watched it, you experienced it, and you felt so inadequate. You felt almost wrong to look at it, like you were invading the Rebbe's space. I remember, I'm just saying this, it's not for Yom Kippur, but Rosh Hashanah Memches. Fabrengen Matzah Yom Tov, the Rebbe passed away. There were a lot of things that happened at Tishrei that were really, really spooky. Simchas Teda that year was unbelievable. But if I remember correctly, the Rebbe got up to dance twice. And in my Yard, the Rebbe didn't get up to dance. In the late Mems, the Rebbe started dancing. When I was a child growing up, my father told me as a kid, all the big Fabrengen, the Rebbe would get up in the middle of Fabrengen and dance and clap. As a child, it never happened, maybe once. And then the late Mems, the Rebbe started getting up to dance in the middle of a Fabrengen. But Memches, the Rebbe finished the Sikha, and jumped out of his seat. The seat went flying. And the Rebbe was doing like this with his hands, like this. The Rebbe's face was red like a beet. It was red like a tomato. And you could see, his body was shaking. He was sobbing. And there was no talus. By Napoleon's march, the Rebbe had a talus. You didn't see his face. But that month, the Rosh Hashanah, you could see the Rebbe's face was red. And his body was trembling, and his body was saying, Freilach, Lebedik. That was moments like these. It makes you appreciate we're around a man who's b'chlal not in our sphere. This person, he has a vision and he understands and he knows the whole world, the Eibish's plans, and he has a certain responsibility and he has something that he has to do, and he's surrounded, with all due respect, by school children. Even the Greis Chassidim, it wasn't the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim, and you think the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim understood the Alter Rebbe. But you would have these moments when you would watch these things happen, and there was nothing to say. What are you going to do? You're going to describe it? What are you going to repeat? Prabha Chazara of the Rebbe shaking like this here. But these are experiences that we had. Anyway, the Rebbe would go down and quickly finish in the Ila. He said, Kavi Aleinu, the Rebbe very quickly took his towels off his head. He opened up the stender doors, took out his hat, and he put it on. There was the only time in the whole year that you ever saw the Rebbe's head. For some reason, I never paid attention to this, but people waited to see the Rebbe's head. There's reasons in Pnimius Hanyanim. The Rebbe never took his talis off, never. The other Rabbeim used to take off their talis on a regular basis by kaveh, as they stated the Rishimis, but the Rebbe didn't. Yom Kippur took his talis and he put on his hat and he davened Ma'ariv. Between Napoleon's march and the end of Ma'ariv is not more than 15 minutes. It's very quick. And then the Rebbe turns around. And he's a transformed person. He's a transformed person. The Rebbe looks gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful. The Rebbe was 80. There wasn't a wrinkle on his face. He was radiant, gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful. The way the Rebbe looked, Matzah Simchas Torah girls, that's how the Rebbe looked. Matzah Yom Kippur is how the Rebbe looked Simchas Torah. Pictures never carried, but if you'll watch pictures or films of the Rebbe walking out of the shul Matzah Simchas Torah, and even by Berachas Kiddush Lavona, the Rebbe is pasha beautiful. He's radiant. His face is shining. The way he looked by Napoleon's march, which was 10 minutes before, literally, and how he looked after Ma'ariv, you don't know how a person changes like that. He was a different man. He just looked gorgeous and so happy. I always tell the girls that Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, you always felt like you're far away from the Rebbe. Simchas Torah, didn't matter how many people you were in shul, you felt like you were standing near him. It looked beautiful, and I like to tell this to the girls. This is seminary base. I probably told this to you last year. There's a film of the Rebbe sitting in shul and talking to B'yamin Gorodetsky. The Rebbe used to have Yechidus Klolis, where the Rebbe would come into the shul and people would walk in, a big group, and the Rebbe would talk to them, and then they would walk out. So when the Rebbe did Yechidus Klolis, the last person to leave was the Rebbe. The shul would empty out, and the Rebbe would leave. The Rebbe had a man whose name was Rebbe Yamin Gorodetsky, after Rabbi Chadakov. He was probably the closest man to the Rebbe, and he traveled for the Rebbe all over the world. Each time he traveled, he would have a yechidus before he came and before he left, after he returned, for hours. He would go into the Rebbe's room and talk. The Rebbe told Yom Gorodetsky that he wants to see him in shul. So for half an hour, there's a film. The Rebbe is sitting in an empty 770. There's nobody in the room, sitting in his chair. And Rabbi Yom Gorodetsky is standing, and the Rebbe is talking. The Rebbe is playing with his mustache. He's playing with his mustache. He's speaking with his hands. It's like two people schmoozing. Rabbi Yom is not sitting, he's standing. The Rebbe looks so, you can Google, you go to YouTube, you can get a few minutes of it. There's a whole half an hour, which I once saw, but you can't find it. But a few minutes, the Rebbe looks so beautiful. The Rebbe just looks so gorgeous. The way the Rebbe looks in that little piece of film, I would advise you, one of the girls last year found it and she gave it out. That's how the Rebbe looked beautiful. And they would announce, they make an announcement, they make Havdalah, they make an announcement. The last couple of years, the Rebbe used to say that you have to talk about building the Sukkah Matzah Yom Kippur, or even build the Sukkah Matzah Yom Kippur. Then the Rebbe would step forward, and he would say loud, Good Yom Tiv, 3 times with his hand, Good Yom Tiv, Good Yom Tiv, Good Yom V'samachta, and they would run out of shul, like walk on water. And this was the way the Rebbe looked. It wasn't just what the Rebbe did. The way the Rebbe looked physically, it created Sukkos. Sukkos started right then. It was just so incredible. The letzte par Jahr, the Rebbe always sang V'samachta. But the last couple of years, the Rebbe would sing his father's Zakafas Niggin. Ay, 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 ay.